Hi everyone, my name is Annie Brenton and I was last year's president of Arizona Alpha.
And I am George Stanchu, the current president of Arizona Alpha.
And we're going to take you through a little bit of our process in going virtual amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Basically, our approach was doing what we did before, but just doing it online. So we didn't get too fancy or reinvent the wheel. A lot of how our chapter operates is very similar. It's just virtual. And we'll have this theme going out throughout the rest of our presentation. Meetings are a major part of how our chapter works and a big feature of what our chapter offers to our members. What changed is obviously we're no longer in person. We went from classroom to Zoom, as a lot of things did, and we like to make our meetings interactive, which is a little challenging on Zoom. So instead of doing a fun get-to-know-you like paper airplane activity, we've switched to things like Kahoot, which is an online trivia platform. And this helps to make Zoom meetings more than just sitting in front of a screen, kind of like a lot of the rest of our life right now. So making them interactive is a challenge, but also important.
What we haven't changed is the main feature of the meetings, which is a talk by a speaker from industry, the university, or the community. And we've also kept up the same frequency of meetings, every 2 weeks.
Socials are another component of our chapter operations. This conversion was pretty simple. We just went from various in-person group events to various in-person or various non-in-person Zoom events.
We maintain the social events as requirements for both new initiates and returning members. Some examples of our virtual socials, a movie night where we chat and all watch the same thing on Netflix, online board games and role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, or a video hangout for the initiates while they polish their miniature beds.
Volunteering is important for all chapters of Tau Beta Pi. A lot of our volunteering events before the pandemic were locally organized events with community partners or events from the university. Now we've transitioned to more national organization activities, which George will provide some examples of below. So we're not as community oriented now, but we're still trying to volunteer.
We've also kept volunteering as membership and initiation requirements. And we have a number of individual options for members to choose from. The activities range from donating food to those affected by the pandemic to writing video subtitles for the hearing impaired.
And you might want to, if you're interested in these, write some of them down and look them up on your own. Other activities not covered in those broad categories are, for example, tutoring for underclassmen engineers. So we used to do in-person tutoring in a classroom with several tutors. We've moved that to Zoom rooms. And I will note that it's important in organizing this to make it very organized and straightforward with making sure the Zoom links are accessible for the underclassmen. So this can't just be a flyer posted in the engineering building anymore. It's got to be some kind of online format for distributing that to underclassmen.
And having all the sports at the university canceled has drastically reduced our fundraising capacity. So this year's treasurer needs to be especially careful with club spending.
And a lot of the success of a chapter hinges on how well the officers operate and how well the chapter as a whole operates. So officer meetings are important regardless of what format you're in. These are basically the same, they're just on Zoom instead of in person. Very similar though. And one thing I found was that I was having more phone calls with officers. I didn't often call people before because I could talk to them after an officer meeting or after a main meeting or something. But it's very important to make sure you maintain communication with your officers.
Officer communication was already largely digital, so we're all still in contact via phone, email, and GroupMe. We also started a Discord server for the chapter, so all of our members can stay in contact. The moral of the story is communication, both among the officers and the general membership. With limited physical interaction, staying in touch is more important now than ever.
And I'm going to take you through a little bit of how we did initiation last semester. Another great resource, which I'll cover on the next slide, is the Tau Beta Pi chapter resources page, which has a lot about initiation. But here are some tips from what we did and we thought was helpful. I thought the in-person initiation that I attended as an initiate was one of the most special parts of Tau Beta Pi and what makes Tau Beta Pi so special. So we tried to maintain that spirit in our Zoom meetings. And the way we did this first was the Zoom sessions themselves. So we had 2 Zoom meetings. The first one was like a hall waiting room for initiates to check in. So we enabled the waiting room feature in Zoom before initiates entered. And then they went into a main room where an officer was there to make sure that the initiates were alone, well-dressed, and just generally prepared for initiation. Once they checked in, they were sent to a breakout room with all the other initiates to wait. Once that was all finished, the initiates were sent in the chat a link to a separate Zoom meeting, which was the ceremony with the officers. And then we went through the ceremony in that call. Some other tips, we had matching Zoom backgrounds. In our in-person initiation, we have candles and robes, maybe a little vintage for some people, but we tried to maintain that in Zoom by having matching candle Zoom backgrounds like you see in the picture there. And it's really important, I think, with all things Zoom that we're finding out, that it's important to practice beforehand, make sure you have all the settings in your Zoom call the way you want them, everyone knows when they're speaking, what they're saying, things like that, to make sure it goes really smoothly and is really special for the initiates. And if you haven't adapted yet, here's some tips based on how we went about changing everything last semester. If you're kind of stuck, it helps to start with a brainstorming session. This applies in all parts of operating your chapter, but especially in this situation as well. And as we presented, one option is to just find online analogs of activities your chapter did before. Another option is to be creative. One thing that we didn't present before, but I thought was pretty cool, was that we used to have an initiate signature sheet where initiates would find other people in the chapter to sign their sheet to get to know them, but we converted that to connecting with other people on LinkedIn. So this was a professional development activity as well. Some other things that we haven't implemented, but were ideas that we had, were Grubhub gift cards for free food, or having Tau Beta Pi Zoom backgrounds, etc. Just being creative and thinking outside the box. And as I mentioned on the last slide, there is a really helpful Tau Beta Pi chapter resources page that they've made, especially since COVID started. And here you can find a lot of resources for initiation, but also just operating your chapter in these times. And with that, we'd like to thank you for attending, and we hope it was helpful for you in operating your chapter. If you have any questions, make sure to attend the ICE session at Unvention. Thank you.